Welcome to What If Sleep Storian, where the boundaries between worlds dissolve and beloved characters step beyond the pages of their original tales. Here, in the hushed hours between day and night, a legendary outlaw might cross paths with a spectral guardian, a cunning hero could unravel ancient rites, and the impossible becomes beautifully inevitable. Each story begins with a simple question, what if? And unfolds into a gentle tapestry of intrigue, wonder, and dreams. Tonight, we begin with something a little mystical, a tale woven from the shadows of Sherwood Forest, where moonlight dances on ancient oaks and whispers of forgotten rites linger in the air. If these stories bring you comfort or spark your imagination, I'd be grateful if you'd like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. Let me know where in the world you're listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. So dim the lights, find your most comfortable position, and let these whispered narratives carry you softly towards sleep. The year is 1190, and Sherwood Forest is a world unto itself. A vast, untamed cathedral of green, where the air hums with secrets. This is not the Sherwood of ballads, where merry outlaws laugh beneath sun-dappled canopies, their quivers brimming and their hearts light. No, this is a forest of contrasts, of beauty and hardship, of life and lurking peril. The leaves rustle with a sound like a distant flute, soft and haunting, as if the trees themselves exhale stories. The scent of damp moss and pine needles fills your lungs, mingling with the faint, acrid tang of wood smoke drifting from a far-off village. If you reached out, your fingers would brush rough bark, cool and slick with evening dew, while the ground beneath your feet crunches with fallen twigs and the occasional sting of a hidden thorn. Can you imagine the smell of the air back then? The way it carried both the promise of spring and the weight of survival. This was a time when every day was a gamble, when a poor harvest or a harsh winter could spell ruin for entire hamlets. The villagers of Nottinghamshire toiled under the yoke of lords and taxes, their hands calloused from ploughing fields, their evenings spent huddled around flickering hearths, the glow of rushlights casting long shadows on wattle and daub walls. Their bread was coarse, baked from rye and barley, its taste earthy and slightly sour, a reminder of the earth's reluctant bounty. The air was thick with the musk of livestock and the sharp bite of sweat-soaked wool. For life here was not the romantic idyll of later tales, but a relentless dance with survival. Yet, in Sherwood's depths, there was a flicker of hope, a name whispered like a prayer. Robin Hood. He was no myth, not yet. He was flesh and blood, his boots caked with mud, his cloak blending into the forest's embrace. Robin moved through the trees with the grace of a stag, his bow slung across his back, its yew-wood smooth from years of use, its string taut as a promise. His eyes, sharp as the starlight piercing the canopy above, missed nothing. A rustle in the underbrush, a glint of steel on a distant road. His merry men, Little John, Will Scarlet, Much the Miller's son, followed him not out of duty but out of loyalty forged in shared hunger and defiance. They were outlaws, yes, but also protectors, stealing from the greedy to feed the desperate, their laughter a defiance against the sheriff's iron grip. Tonight, though, something else stirs in Sherwood, something older than Robin, older than the Normans, older even than the stones that mark the Druids' forgotten circles. A chill creeps through the forest, not from the wind, but from a presence that makes the horses shy and the birds fall silent. The villagers speak of it in hushed tones, their voices trembling over mugs of small ale, its taste thin and bitter. They call it a wraith, a spectral guardian bound to the ancient oaks, stealing the life from any who stray too deep into its domain. Travellers have vanished, merchants with their carts of wool, pilgrims with their worn sandals, even a young shepherd boy, his crook found abandoned beneath a gnarled tree. The forest, for all its beauty, holds its breath tonight, and the air tastes of frost and something sharper, like the memory of blood. Robin crouched low behind a gnarled oak, his breath slow and steady. the faint taste of wild mint lingering on his tongue from a sprig he'd chewed to calm his nerves. The moonlight filtered through the branches, casting dappled shadows across his face, his green cloak blending with the moss. "John," he whispered, his voice barely louder than the rustle of leaves, "do you feel it? The air. It's heavier tonight." Little John, a mountain of a man with a beard like tangled brambles, nodded grimly. His massive quarterstaff rested against his shoulder, its wood worn smooth from countless sparring bouts. "Aye, Robin," he rumbled, his voice low and warm like a hearth-fire in a storm. "The men are spooked. Will swears he saw a shadow move where no shadow should be, and Much, well, he's muttering about ghosts again." Robin's lips curved into a half-smile, though his eyes remained sharp, scanning the darkness. Much would see a ghost in a bowl of pottage if the light hit it wrong. The jest was soft, meant to ease the tension, but it couldn't mask the truth. Something was wrong in Sherwood. The villagers' tales were no mere fireside fancies. The Wraith, they said, was a figure cloaked in mist, its eyes like twin moons, draining the strength from those it touched until they collapsed, pale and lifeless beneath the trees. Robin did not believe in ghosts, not yet, but he believed in the fear he saw in the villagers' eyes, in the way mothers clutched their children closer at dusk, in the silence that fell when the forest name was spoken. What would you have done in a world like this? To walk a forest path where every snap of a twig might herald a spectre, where the line between myth and truth blurred like mist over a stream? Robin, for his part, trusted his bow and his wits, but tonight he felt the weight of the unknown, a challenge no arrow could meet. He rose, his cloak whispering against the underbrush, and motioned for his men to follow. Their footsteps were muffled by years of fallen leaves, the ground soft and cool beneath their boots, the air sharp with the scent of earth, and that metallic tang that lingered, unplaceable yet unsettling. They came upon a clearing where an ancient oak stood like a sentinel, its branches twisted as if reaching for the stars. At its base, a circle of stones lay half buried in the earth, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. The villagers called this place sacred, a remnant of the druids who once walked these woods, their chants lost to time but their presence lingering in the soil. The air here was colder, the silence deeper, as if the forest held its breath. A faint mist curled around the oak's roots, though no fog cloaked the rest of the woods, and the scent of damp stone mingled with something older, like the breath of forgotten gods. Robin's eyes narrowed as he studied the scene, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his dagger, its bone handle cool against his palm. "This place feels alive," he murmured, more to himself than to his men. Alive and watching. Will Scarlet, lean and quick, his red cloak a bold splash against the green, stepped closer, his voice tight with unease. "Robin, this clearing, it's like the forest heart, but it's not beating right. I'd rather face a dozen of the sheriff's men than linger here." Robin nodded, his gaze fixed on the mist. "Stay sharp, Will. If this wraith is real, it's no friend to us, or to the folk we protect." He knelt beside the stones, his fingers brushing one, expecting cold granite but finding it warm, almost pulsing, as if it held a heartbeat of its own. He pulled his hand back, his pulse quickening, the air suddenly sharp with the scent of ozone, like a storm brewing in the stillness. "John, fetch a torch," Robin said, his voice steady despite the unease creeping up his spine. "We'll see what secrets this place holds." Little John moved to obey, his massive frame rustling the underbrush, the sound like a whisper in the dark. But before he could return, a sound broke the silence. A low, mournful wail, like the wind but sharper, more human. It came from everywhere and nowhere, weaving through the trees, raising the hairs on Robin's neck. The merry men froze, their hands tightening on their weapons, Will's dagger half drawn, Much's bow trembling in his grip, his knuckles white. "That's no wind," Much whispered, his voice barely audible, his breath misting in the cold. It's here." Robin stood, his bow now in hand, an arrow nocked but not drawn. its fletching brushing his fingers like a feather. "Steady, lads," he said, his tone calm, almost soothing, though his eyes scanned the darkness with the precision of a hawk. "Whatever this is, it bleeds fear, not blood. We've faced worse than shadows." But as the wail grew louder, the mist thickened, swirling upward like a living thing, and in the heart of the clearing it appeared, a figure cloaked in pale light, its form indistinct yet undeniably present. Its eyes, twin moons glowing in the night, held no malice but a deep, aching sorrow, as if it were bound to this place against its will. The air grew colder, the scent of frost sharpening, and the forest seemed to exhale, its branches still as if in reverence. What would it feel like to stand in that clearing, the air thick with mystery, the ground beneath you humming with ancient power? To know the world you thought you mastered was unravelling, thread by thread, revealing secrets older than your name? Robin took a step forward, his bow lowered, his voice soft but firm like a friend addressing a wary stranger. "Who are you?" he asked, speaking to the wraith as he would a living soul. "What do you seek in these woods?" The wraith's form flickered, its wail softening to a sigh, like leaves scattering in a storm. For a moment it seemed to regard him, its glowing eyes narrowing, and then, with a sound like a breeze dying in the branches, it vanished, leaving only the mist and the echo of its cry. The merry men stood in stunned silence, their breaths visible in the cold, their hands still on their weapons. Robin lowered his bow, his mind alight with questions, his heart pounding but steady. This was no ordinary foe, no soldier he could outwit or outshoot. It was a guardian, perhaps, tied to the forest's ancient heart, and if it was to be faced, he would need more than arrows and courage. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the trees, painting the leaves with a soft gold, Robin turned to his men, his voice low and resolute. "We head to the hamlet at first light," he said, his words blending with the rustle of leaves. "The folk there know more than they've told. If we are to free Sherwood of this wraith, we'll need their help." The forest seemed to nod, its branches swaying gently, and the merry men moved back through the trees, their footsteps a soft rhythm against the earth. The air was lighter now, carrying the faint sweetness of dew-soaked ferns, but the wraith's presence lingered, a shadow in their thoughts. The story was only beginning, and the night was far from over. Here, gentle dreamer, we pause in the quiet of Sherwood's embrace, where the line between man and myth grows thin as a whisper. Let the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a night bird linger in your mind as you drift towards sleep. We'll return to Robin and his quest, to the wraith and its secrets, in the next whispered chapter of this tale. For now, rest well, and let the forest hold you close. The dawn crept over Sherwood like a shy guest, its golden light threading through the oaks to touch the earth with warmth. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of dew-soaked moss and the faint sweetness of wild honeysuckle, but beneath it lingered a memory of the night's chill, the wraith's presence like a half-forgotten dream. The forest was waking now, with the chatter of sparrows and the distant low of cattle from the fields beyond. Yet, for Robin Hood and his merry men, the night's mystery clung to them, as persistent as the mist that curled around the roots of the great oak in the druidic clearing. Robin led the way toward the hamlet of Edwinstowe, his steps measured, his cloak brushing against brambles that snagged like eager fingers. The path was narrow, worn by centuries of feet. Pilgrims, traders and outlaws alike, its edges blurred by moss and creeping ivy. The air tasted of earth and smoke, a reminder of the villagers who rose before dawn to stoke their hearths and knead their coarse rye dough, its texture gritty against their palms. This was no world of grand feasts or silken finery. It was a world of survival, where every loaf was earned through sweat, every fire a bulwark against the cold. Can you picture it? The way the morning light would catch the thatched roofs, turning them to gold, while the air carried the sharp tang of the livestock and the faint bitterness of ash. To walk these paths, your boots heavy with mud, your heart torn between hope and the weight of an uncertain world. Robin's men followed close behind, their usual banter subdued. Little John's massive frame cast a long shadow, his quarterstaff tapping the ground rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Will Scarlet's red cloak flickered like a flame against the green, his eyes darting to every rustle in the underbrush, his dagger's hilt cool under his fingers. Much, still pale from the wraith's appearance, clutched his bow tightly, muttering under his breath about spirits and curses, his lips dry from the night's chill. Robin glanced back at them, his expression calm but his mind racing. The wraith was no mere tale, it was real, and its sorrowful gaze had stirred something in him. Not fear, but curiosity, a need to understand. The hamlet of Edwinstowe came into view as the forest thinned, its cluster of wattle and daub cottages huddled together like wary travellers. Smoke rose in lazy spirals from chimneys, and the air was thick with the scent of baking bread, its crusty warmth mingling with the sour musk of penned goats. Children darted between houses, their laughter sharp and fleeting, their bare feet slapping the damp earth. Women hauled buckets from a well, their arms straining, the water's cold bite seeping into their hands. Men, their faces weathered by sun and toil, sharpened scythes or mended nets, their movements slow but deliberate, the metal's tang sharp in the air. This was life in 1190, a fragile balance, where a single failed crop or a lord's whim could tip a family into ruin. Robin paused at the hamlet's edge, his hand raised to halt his men. "We're not here to take," he said softly, his voice carrying the warmth of a trusted friend. "We're here to listen. The folk here know the forest's secrets better than we ever will." Little John nodded, his beard twitching with a faint smile. "Aye, but they'll not trust us easily. Outlaws we are to them as much as to the sheriff." "Then we prove ourselves," Robin replied, his eyes scanning the hamlet. "We ask for their help, not their coin." As they entered the village, the air grew heavier with the smells of tanned leather and fresh-turned earth, the ground soft under their boots. A woman looked up from her washing, her hands red from the cold water, her gaze wary but not unkind. A man leaning on a pitchfork studied them a moment longer than necessary, his eyes narrowing, the wood's grain rough against his palms. Robin met their stares with a nod, his posture open, his smile disarming. He was no stranger here. These folk knew of Robin Hood, the outlaw who slipped them grain when the sheriff's taxes left their pantries bare. But trust was a fragile thing, and tales of the wraith had set nerves on edge, the air thick with whispers of fear. Robin's gaze settled on a small cottage at the hamlet's edge, its roof sagging under a heavy layer of thatch, its walls stained with years of smoke. An old woman stood outside, her back bent like a willow, her hands gnarled as the roots of the ancient oak. She was stirring a pot over a fire, the steam carrying the sharp green scent of herbs, rosemary, sage, and something earthier, like crushed nettle. Her eyes, bright despite her age, locked onto Robin before he spoke a word, their clarity cutting through the morning mist. "You're the one they call Hood," she said, her voice low and steady like stones smoothed by a river. "What brings you to our doorstep, troubling the peace of old Agnes?" Robin stepped forward, his tone respectful, almost gentle, his cloak brushing the dew-soaked grass. "I'm Robin, he said, his voice soft as the morning mist, "and I come seeking wisdom, not trouble. The forest is restless, Agnes. A wraith walks Sherwood, and we've seen it with our own eyes." Agnes paused, her wooden spoon still in the pot, the fire crackling, sending sparks upward like tiny stars. "A wraith, you say," she murmured, her eyes narrowing, her fingers tightening on the spoon's worn handle. "And you think to chase it with bows and bravado?" Robin's lips twitched, but he kept his tone earnest. "Not chase, good mother. Understand. It's taken folk, merchants, a boy from your hamlet. We'd see it stopped, but we're no match for spirits without guidance." Agnes studied him, her gaze piercing yet warm, like a grandmother weighing a child's truth. "The wraith is no demon," she said at last. her voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to blend with the wind. "It's a guardian, bound to the old ways, to the oaks and stones of our fathers' fathers. It does not kill for spite, but for purpose. And you, Robin Hood, will not banish it with steel." Robin's brow furrowed, but he nodded, sensing the weight of her words, the air thick with the scent of herbs and smoke. "Then what will banish it, Agnes? Tell us, and we'll do what's needed." She set her spoon aside, wiping her hands on a cloth stained with years of herb work, its texture rough against her skin. "Not here," she said, glancing at the villagers who lingered nearby, their ears straining, their hands paused on their tasks. "Come inside, and bring only one of your men. The rest can wait." Robin glanced at Little John, who gave a slight nod, his quarterstaff tapping the ground softly. "Will, stay with Much and the others," Robin said, his voice calm but firm. "Keep your eyes open, but don't stir trouble." Will Scarlet grinned, though his eyes were still wary, his fingers brushing the dagger at his belt. "No trouble from me, Robin. But if that wraith comes sniffing round, I'll give it a taste of my blade." Agnes snorted softly, a sound halfway between amusement and disdain, her breath misting in the cool air. "Blades," she muttered, turning toward her cottage. "Fools and their toys." Inside, the cottage was dim, lit only by the fire's glow and a single rushlight that sputtered in a clay holder, its waxy scent mingling with the herbs hanging from the rafters, lavender, thyme, and something sharper like wormwood. The floor was packed earth, cool underfoot, and a wooden table bore the scars of years, its surface cluttered with bowls of crushed leaves and a mortar-stained green. Agnes gestured for Robin and Little John to sit on a bench, its wood worn smooth by countless visitors, its surface cool against their thighs. The air was warm, thick with the scent of dried herbs, and the fire's crackle was a soft counterpoint to the morning's quiet. "You've seen the wraith," Agnes began, her voice slow and deliberate, each word chosen with care like stones placed in a stream. "But you've not seen its heart. It's tied to the forest, to the old rites of the druids who walked these lands before the cross came. They bound spirits to the oaks, to guard the sacred places. This one lingers because its task is unfinished." Robin leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his eyes fixed on Agnes, the air heavy with the weight of her words. "What task? And why take folk now after all these years?" Agnes's hands moved almost unconsciously to a small bundle of cloth on the table. She unwrapped it, revealing a branch of oak, its bark rough, but its leaves still green, as if freshly plucked, their scent earthy and sharp. "This," she said, her fingers tracing the bark, "is from the great oak in the clearing. The wraith is bound to it, and it takes life not out of cruelty, but need. The forest is weakening. Its heart, its power fades as men forget the old ways. The wraith seeks strength to endure." Little John shifted, the bench creaking under his weight, his hands resting on his knees, the calluses rough from years of wielding his staff. "Strength from folks' lives." "That's a grim guardian, Agnes," she nodded, her expression unyielding but not unkind, her eyes catching the fire's glow. "Grim, aye, but not evil. It takes what it must to protect what remains. You'd not understand, living as you do, all bluster and arrows. But there's one who might help. A girl, Elara, who knows the herbs and the old chants better than I." Robin's eyes lit with interest, his fingers brushing the table's scarred surface. "Where do we find this Elara?" Agnes's gaze softened, a flicker of pride crossing her face, like sunlight breaking through clouds. "She's in the fields, gathering what the forest offers, young but wise beyond her years. Find her, and she'll guide you to the wraith's heart. But heed me, Robin Hood. This is no fight for your bow. You'll need salt, and the oak, and words older than your name." Robin nodded, his mind already turning, the air thick with the scent of lavender and the faint tang of wax. "Salt and words," he repeated, his voice low, almost a vow. "We'll find her, Agnes, and we'll see this done. What would it feel like to sit in that cottage, the air alive with the weight of ancient words, the fire's glow a fragile shield against the unknown? To know the path ahead was neither battle nor theft, but a dance with forces older than stone. As they stepped back into the morning light, the hamlet hummed with life. Children's laughter, the clink of a blacksmith's hammer, the low murmur of gossip. The air was rich with the scent of fresh-baked bread and the faint musk of livestock, a reminder of the village's fragile rhythm. Robin led Little John back to the others, his cloak catching the breeze, his thoughts on Ilara and the strange path ahead. The forest loomed at their backs, its shadows deeper now, as if waiting. The sun climbed higher, painting the fields in shades of gold, but the wraith's sorrow lingered, a quiet current beneath the day's warmth. Here, gentle wanderer, we rest in the soft cradle of dawn, where the forest's murmurs blend with the glow of morning and the world holds its breath. Let the scent of herbs and the distant song of a lark cradle you as you drift. We'll return to Robin, to Ilara, and to the wraith's sorrowful heart in the next soft turn of this tale. For now, breathe deep and let the story carry you towards sleep. The midday sun draped Sherwood in a golden haze, its warmth softening the edges of the forest's ancient mysteries. Beyond the hamlet of Edwinstowe, where the air hummed with the rhythm of daily toil, women grinding grain with stone querns, the gritty sound blending with the creak of wooden yokes, men mending roofs with bundles of fresh thatch. The fields stretched wide, kissed by clover and dotted with the stubborn green of early crops. The scent of wildflowers mingled with the damp earthiness of ploughed soil, a reminder of life's persistence in a world where survival was never certain. Robin moved through this landscape with the ease of a man born to it, his cloak catching the breeze, his boots leaving faint prints in the dew-soaked grass, the earth cool and yielding beneath his tread. Little John walked at his side, his quarterstaff a steady companion, its wood tapping the ground like a pulse. Will Scarlet's red cloak flickered like a spark against the green, his eyes sharp but softened by the day's light, his fingers brushing the dagger at his belt, its steel cool to the touch. Much scanned the horizon, his fingers twitching on his bowstring, his lips still tasting the stale bread he'd eaten at dawn, its grainy texture a small comfort. The wraith's mournful cry echoed in their minds, a thread of sorrow woven into the forest's song. Robin's thoughts turned to Agnes's words, to the oak branch and the ancient rites that bound the wraith to Sherwood's heart. The path ahead was no simple raid or rescue. It was a journey into the unknown, where cunning would matter more than courage. In a meadow fringed with hawthorn, its thorns sharp as needles, they found Ilara, the young herbalist Agnes had named. She knelt among the grasses, her hands deftly gathering leaves, her basket brimming with the sharp green scent of yarrow and the softer notes of chamomile. Her braid fell over one shoulder, dark as the forest's shadows, and her eyes, when they met Robin's, held a clarity that belied her youth, their colour like the sky at dusk. She rose as he approached, brushing dirt from her hands, the soil cool and gritty against her skin, her movements unhurried, as if time itself bent to her rhythm. Robin crouched beside her, his voice low, blending with the hum of bees and the rustle of leaves. "Ilara," he said, his tone respectful, like a guest in a sacred place. "Agnes sent us." The forest is troubled. A wraith walks its paths and we've seen its sorrow. She says you know the old ways, the chants that might calm it. Ilara listened, her fingers tracing the edge of a yarrow leaf, its bitter scent rising as she crushed it gently. Her expression was calm but weighted with understanding, her breath slow and steady, misting faintly in the midday air. "The wraith is no phantom born of malice," she said, her voice soft, like water over stones. "It's a guardian, forged when druids sang to the stars, tethered to the great oak in the clearing. Its roots drink from springs older than memory, but those springs weaken as men forget the old ways, felling trees, neglecting the chants. The wraith takes life not to harm, but to endure, to keep the forest's heart beating. Can you feel the meadow's warmth, the sun on your face, the scent of herbs sharp in the air? To stand where the world feels alive with secrets, where every blade of grass seems to whisper of forgotten promises." Alara spoke of a ritual to bind the wraith, her words careful, each one a thread in a fragile tapestry. A circle of salt laid under the full moon's gaze could hold it still, giving it form long enough to hear its truth. The oak branch, blessed with words from a time before iron, would anchor it, a bridge between worlds. But the ritual was delicate, she warned, each step precise, each word a note in a song that could not falter. A single misstep could turn the wraith's sorrow to anger, and Sherwood would pay the price. The air was thick with the scent of clover and the faint hum of bees, and Robin nodded, his mind weaving her words into a plan, not of battle but of negotiation, a chance to honour the forest's ancient pact. He asked of the salt, of the chance, and Alara promised to guide them, her voice steady but laced with caution, her hands brushing the grass, its blades cool and soft. The forest was no mere wilderness. It was a living thing, its roots deep with memory, its branches heavy with purpose. To face the wraith was to face Sherwood's soul. The sun climbed higher, painting the meadow in shades of gold and green, and Robin stood, offering Alara a nod, his heart steady but his thoughts alive with possibility. The merry men gathered close, their faces a mix of resolve and unease. Little John's brow was knit, his hands restless, the quarterstaff's wood warm from his grip. Will's fingers danced, as if seeking the comfort of his dagger, its blade glinting in the sunlight. Much's eyes darted to the forest, his lips moving silently, as if praying against the shadows. They returned to the hamlet as the afternoon softened, the air growing heavy with the promise of dusk. The village was quieter now, its morning bustle replaced by the slow rhythm of rest, women spinning wool in doorways, the soft whir of their spindles blending with the murmur of voices. The scent of stew, rich with turnips and herbs, drifted from cottages, mingling with the ever-present smoke of hearths. Robin led Alara and his men to Agnes's cottage, where the elder waited, her hands folded over the oak branch, its leaves catching the light like fragments of the forest itself. Inside, the air was warm, thick with the scent of dried lavender and the faint tang of wax from a flickering rushlight. Agnes spoke sparingly, her words heavy with purpose, as she handed Alara a pouch of coarse grey salt, harvested from distant seas, its grains rough against her fingers. The ritual, she said, would unfold at the great oak under the full moon 2 nights hence. She taught them the chants, their syllables strange and heavy, like pebbles sinking into a still pond. Robin listened, his mind tracing each sound, binding it to the rhythm of the forest breath, the air alive with the weight of ancient knowledge. What would it mean to sit in that cottage, the fire's glow dancing on the walls, the scent of herbs thick in the air, to feel the weight of words older than the stones beneath the oak, knowing they held the key to a forest's peace. As evening settled over Edwinstowe, the hamlet glowed with the soft light of fires and rushlights, the air crisp with the first hint of autumn's bite. Robin and his men made camp just beyond the village, their fire a small beacon against the gathering dark, its crackle blending with the distant bark of a dog. Alara sat with them, her basket at her side, her presence a quiet anchor, the scent of chamomile clinging to her hands. The stars emerged, sharp and countless, and the forest seemed to lean closer, its whispers soft but insistent, the air tasting of frost and pine. Here, gentle dreamer, we linger in the soft hush of evening, where the glow of embers dances with the night's quiet breath, and the forest's whispers cradle your thoughts. Let the scent of burning wood and the distant song of a nightjar linger in your dreams. The tale of Robin and the wraith draws closer to its heart, and will follow its threads under the moonlight's glow. For now, rest easy, and let the story carry you towards sleep. The evening settled over Sherwood like a velvet cloak, its edges tinged with the amber glow of fading daylight. The hamlet of Edwinstowe softened into shadow, its cottages glowing with the flicker of rushlights, their smoke curling upward to mingle with the crisp scent of autumn leaves. The air carried the faint tang of boiled cabbage and the richer, earthy note of damp soil stirred by the day's labour. Beyond the village the forest loomed, its ancient oaks standing sentinel, their branches swaying as if whispering secrets to the stars. Robin sat by the small fire at the edge of the hamlet, his men gathered close, their faces etched with the quiet resolve of those who knew the night held more than rest. Elara knelt nearby, her fingers sorting through her basket, separating sprigs of sage from the delicate white blooms of yarrow, their scents sharp and green in the cool air. The firelight danced across her face, catching the intensity in her eyes, a blend of determination and reverence for the task ahead. Agnes's words echoed in Robin's mind. The ritual, the circle of salt, the oak branch that pulsed with the forest's heart. The full moon was coming, its light already swelling in the sky, a silver promise above the treetops. The wraith waited, its sorrow a weight that pressed against the edges of their camp, unseen but ever present. The fire crackled, sending sparks upward like tiny prayers, and the air was alive with the scent of burning pine and the faint metallic bite of cooling earth. Robin's cloak was heavy with dew, his boots crusted with the mud of the day's trek. He leaned forward, his voice low, a murmur that wove into the night's rhythm. He spoke to Elara, asking of the ritual's details, his words careful, respectful of the knowledge she carried. Her hands paused, a sprig of thyme between her fingers, its sharp scent rising as she crushed it gently, her breath misting in the cool air. The ritual, she explained, was older than the village, older than the tales of kings and conquests. It began with the salt, scattered in a circle under the great oak, each grain a ward against the wraith's restless power. The oak branch, blessed with chants that tasted of earth and starlight, would serve as a tether, drawing the wraith into the circle where it could be heard. The words themselves were heavy, their syllables shaped by generations of women who guarded the forest's secrets. Elara's voice was soft but steady, each word a step in a dance she had learned at Agnes's knee. She taught Robin the first of the chants, its cadence slow and lilting, like a lullaby for the land itself, the air thick with the scent of sage and smoke. Can you imagine the weight of those words, their sound filling the night, each one a thread binding you to a world older than memory? To sit by that fire, the air thick with the scent of herbs and smoke, knowing the forest was listening? Little John sat across the fire, his massive hands resting on his knees, his eyes fixed on Elara with a quiet respect, his breath slow and steady. Will Scarlet, ever restless, sharpened a dagger with a whetstone, the soft scrape blending with the night sounds, the blade's edge catching the firelight. Much, his nerves frayed by the wraith's shadow, chewed on a piece of hard bread, its stale, grainy taste a small comfort, his fingers brushing the crumbs from his tunic. The merry men were no strangers to danger, but this was no sheriff's patrol or noble's caravan. This was a force they could not outrun or outwit with a well-placed arrow. Yet Robin's calm anchored them, his presence a reminder that even the unknown could be faced with a steady heart. Elara rose, her basket tucked under her arm, and led them back to Agnes's cottage as the night deepened. The hamlet was quiet now, save for the occasional bark of a dog or the soft creak of a shutter, the air cool with the scent of frost and apples stored in cellars. Inside the cottage, Agnes waited, her hands folded over the oak branch, its bark rough under her fingers, its leaves still impossibly green. The room was warm, the air thick with the scent of dried rosemary and the faint waxy tang of a single candle burning low. A small clay bowl sat on the table, filled with the coarse grey salt that would form the ritual circle, its grains glinting faintly in the firelight. Agnes's eyes met Elara's, a silent exchange of trust, then turned to Robin. Her voice, when she spoke, was like the rustle of leaves, soft but unyielding. She spoke of the wraith's purpose, not to destroy, but to protect, its sorrow born of a world that had forgotten its roots. The ritual would not banish it, she said, but give it peace, allowing it to rest without taking life. The chants, the salt, the oak, they were offerings, a way to honour the forest's ancient pact. But the wraith would test them, its power vast and unpredictable, its sorrow a tide that could sweep away the careless. Robin listened, his mind tracing the path ahead, the air heavy with the scent of wax and herbs. He saw not a foe but a guardian, misunderstood yet bound by duty, much like himself. A kinship stirred in him, between the outlaw who stole for the poor and the spirit who stole for the forest. He asked of the dangers, of the wraith's strength, and Agnes's gaze softened, her gnarled hands tightening on the oak branch, its texture rough against her skin. The wraith could not be fought, she said, only understood. Its power lay in its sorrow, and only by meeting it with respect could they hope to succeed. What would you have done, standing in that cottage, the air heavy with the weight of ancient rites, to know the forest's heart was at stake, its pulse tied to your own? Elara took the oak branch, her fingers gentle but sure, and handed it to Robin. Its weight was surprising, heavy with more than wood, as if it carried the forest's memory. She spoke the chants again, slower now, guiding Robin and Little John through their rhythm. The words felt strange on Robin's tongue, their sounds older than the stones beneath the great oak, yet they settled into him like a song half remembered. Will and Much watched from the corner, their silence a rare thing, their eyes wide with the weight of the moment, the air thick with the scent of lavender and the faint crackle of the fire. As the night grew late, the group stepped outside, the air sharp with the bite of frost and the distant scent of pine. The moon hung low, nearly full, its light silvering the rooftops and casting long shadows across the hamlet. Robin's men returned to their camp, their fire still burning, a small defiance against the dark. Elara stayed with them, her presence a quiet strength, her knowledge a light in the gathering mystery. They spoke little, the chants lingering in their minds, the forest's pulse a steady hum beneath their feet, the ground cool and damp. Here, gentle wanderer, we rest in the quiet cradle of dusk, where the forest's murmurs blend with the glow of twilight, and the world holds its breath. Let the flicker of firelight and the soft rustle of leaves guide you toward dreams. The tale of Robin and the wraith weaves ever onward, its secrets waiting beneath the moon's silver gaze. For now, sink into the night's embrace, and let sleep find you gently. The full moon hung over Sherwood like a silver coin, its light piercing the canopy to bathe the forest in a glow that felt both sacred and strange. The air was crisp, heavy with the scent of frost-kissed leaves and the sharp, resinous tang of pine, as if the woods themselves exhaled in anticipation. Beyond the hamlet of Edwinstowe, where the last embers of hearth fires flickered behind shuttered windows, the night was alive with whispers, soft rustles of branches, the distant call of a nightjar, the faint hum of a world older than memory. Robin moved through the trees, his steps silent on a carpet of moss and fallen twigs, the oak branch in his hand pulsing with a warmth that seemed to echo the forest's heart, its bark rough against his palm. Elara walked at his side, her fingers clutching a small pouch of coarse grey salt, its grains gritty against her skin, harvested from seas that churned far beyond Nottinghamshire. Her breath misted in the cool air, her eyes bright with a resolve that matched the moonlight, her braid catching the silver glow. Little John followed, his quarterstaff tapping the earth with a steady rhythm, his massive frame a quiet anchor for the group, his beard damp with the night's dew. Will Scarlet's red cloak caught the moon's glow, a flicker of defiance against the shadows, while Much, his nerves taut, scanned the darkness, his bow gripped tightly, its wood cool and smooth. The great oak stood ahead, its branches twisting like a cathedral's spires, its roots sprawling across the clearing like veins of the earth. The air here was heavier, thick with the damp scent of moss and the faint metallic tang of hidden springs, as if the forest's secrets bubbled just beneath the surface. Robin's cloak brushed against brambles, their thorns snagging like eager fingers, and he felt the oak branch grow warmer in his grip, its leaves catching the moonlight like fragments of a lost song. Elara's movements were deliberate, her steps tracing a path worn by centuries of unseen pilgrims, her presence a bridge between the village's lore and the forest's mystery. The ritual began under the oak's watchful gaze, the moonlight casting long shadows that danced across the clearing. Elara knelt, her hands steady as she scattered the salt in a wide circle around the tree, each grain glinting like a star fallen to earth. The act was slow, almost reverent, as if she were weaving a spell into the soil itself. The air grew colder, a chill that seeped into the bones, and the forest fell silent. The nightjar's call replaced by a stillness that pressed against the ears. Robin stood at the circle's edge, the oak branch raised, its weight a reminder of the task's gravity. Little John took his place opposite, his quarterstaff planted like a sentinel, while Will and Much flanked the circle, their eyes darting to the shadows that seemed to shift and breathe. Picture yourself in that moonlit glade, the night's chill brushing your face, the air heavy with the tang of moss and whispered secrets. To feel the forest watching, its pulse thrumming beneath your feet, as if you stood at the edge of a world both familiar and unknown. Elara's voice rose, soft and melodic, carrying the first of the chants Agnes had taught. The words were strange, their syllables heavy with the cadence of a time when men spoke to the stars. They wove through the night, blending with the rustle of leaves, each sound a thread in a tapestry that seemed to bind the clearing to the heavens. Robin joined her, his voice low and unpracticed but steady, the chant settling into him like a memory he hadn't known he carried. The oak branch trembled in his hand, its leaves quivering as if stirred by an unseen wind, and the air shimmered, charged with a presence that made the heart quicken. The wraith appeared without warning, its form coalescing from the mist that curled around the oak's roots. It was no mere shadow, but a figure cloaked in pale light, its edges indistinct, its eyes like twin moons glowing with a sorrow that pierced the soul. The air grew colder still, the scent of frost sharpening, and the merry men stiffened, their hands tightening on their weapons, Will's dagger half drawn, Much's bow trembling. But Robin raised a hand, his gesture calm, his eyes locked on the wraiths. This was no moment for steel. This was a moment for understanding, for honouring the forest's ancient pact. Elara's chant grew stronger, her voice a beacon in the night, and Robin echoed her, the words flowing more naturally now, as if the forest itself guided his tongue. The wraith hovered, its form wavering, its eyes searching the circle as if seeking something lost. It did not strike, didn't wail, but drifted closer, its presence a weight that pressed against the chest. Little John's breath was visible, his massive frame tense but unmoving, while Will's fingers twitched, his dagger still half drawn before he caught himself. Much's eyes were wide, his lips moving in silent prayer, but he held his ground, the salt circle a fragile shield beneath their feet. The wraith's gaze settled on Robin, and for a moment the world seemed to still. The moonlight, the chants, the forest's breath, all held in a single fragile instant. He saw not malice in its eyes, but a deep, aching grief, as if it carried the weight of centuries forgotten by those who walked these woods. The oak branch grew warmer, almost burning, and Robin stepped forward, his voice steady as he spoke the final chant, the words rising like a tide. The wraith's form flickered, its light softening, and the air seemed to hum, as if the forest exhaled in relief. But the ritual was not complete. Elara's hands faltered, her eyes darting to Robin, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. The salt circle held, but the wraith's power was vast, its sorrow a current that threatened to break free. She whispered to Robin, her voice barely audible over the chants, urging him to hold the branch higher, to let its warmth anchor the wraith's form. He did, his arms steady despite the weight, his mind racing with the cunning that had outwitted sheriffs and soldiers. The wraith's eyes flared, its form swirling faster, and the air grew thick with the scent of ozone, sharp and electric, as if a storm brewed within the clearing. What would it feel like to stand there, the oak branch heavy in your hands, the wraith's sorrow pressing against your heart? To know the forest's fate hung on your voice, your will, your respect for a world older than your own? Robin's voice rose, the chants blending with Alara's, their harmony a fragile thread binding the wraith to the circle. Little John stepped closer, his quarterstaff raised not in threat but in readiness, his eyes fixed on the wraith's shifting form. Will and Much held their places, their fear tempered by trust in Robin, their hands steady despite the cold that seeped into their bones. The wraith wavered, its light dimming and flaring, as if torn between its duty and the promise of rest. The oak branch glowed faintly, its leaves trembling, and the forest seemed to lean closer, its branches swaying in a wind that no one felt. Alara's hands moved again, scattering the last of the salt, her chants growing softer, almost a lullaby. The wraith's form steadied, its eyes no longer wild but searching, as if it saw Robin not as a threat, but as a messenger. The air softened, the scent of frost giving way to the warm, earthy tang of the oak, and the clearing seemed to breathe, its tension easing like a sigh. But the ritual was not yet finished, the wraith not yet at peace. Robin knew the path ahead would test them further, that the forest's heart demanded more than chants and salt. It demanded understanding, a bridge between the old ways and the world he knew. Here, soft wanderer, we linger in the moonlight's gentle embrace, where the oak's shadow sways and the forest's breath weaves dreams from starlight. Let the hum of ancient chants and the warmth of the earth guide you toward rest. The tale of Robin and the wraith flows onward, its truths waiting in the night's quiet depths, ready to unfold when you return. For now, let the forest's song carry you softly to sleep. The moonlight bathed Sherwood Forest in a silver glow, its beams weaving through the ancient oaks to paint the clearing in shades of dream and shadow. The air was thick with the scent of frozen moss and the faint, bitter tang of crushed nettles, stirred by the night's gentle breath. The great oak stood at the heart of the scene, its gnarled branches reaching skyward as if cradling the moon itself. Beneath it, the salt circle glimmered, a fragile barrier against the wraith's restless power, its grains catching the light like scattered pearls. Robin stood within the circle, the oak branch heavy in his hands, its bark warm against his palms, as if it pulsed with the forest's own life. His cloak, damp with dew, clung to his shoulders, and his breath misted in the chill, each exhale a silent vow to see this through. Alara knelt across from him, her hand steady as she traced the salt's edge, her eyes fixed on the wraith's shimmering form, her braid catching the moonlight. The guardian hovered, its pale light flickering like a candle in a storm, its twin moon eyes glowing with a sorrow that seemed to seep into the earth itself. Little John stood at the circle's northern point, his quarterstaff planted firmly, his massive frame a pillar against the night's uncertainty. Will Scarlet, his red cloak a bold slash in the moonlight, watched the shadows with a hunter's focus, his fingers still on his dagger's hilt, its steel cool to the touch. Much, his face pale but resolute, gripped his bow, his eyes darting between the wraith and Robin, seeking reassurance in his leader's calm. The forest was silent, save for the soft chant that rose from Lilara's lips, its syllables ancient and heavy, like stones sinking into a still lake. The words wove through the air, blending with the rustle of leaves and the distant sigh of a breeze, as if Sherwood itself joined the song. Robin echoed her, his voice low but steady, the chant settling into him like a rhythm he had always known. The oak branch trembled, its leaves quivering, and the air grew thick with the scent of earth and something sharper, like the memory of rain on stone. The wraith's form wavered, its light pulsing in time with the chants, as if drawn to their cadence. The ritual was a delicate balance, each word and gesture a step in a dance older than the Normans who claimed these lands. Ilara had warned of its fragility. One misspoken syllable, one faltering hand, and the wraith's sorrow could turn to wrath, its power a tide that could sweep them all away. Yet Robin felt no fear, only a quiet resolve, his mind sharp with the cunning that had outwitted lords and sheriffs. He saw the wraith not as a foe but as a mirror, its duty to the forest as fierce as his own to its people. The oak branch grew warmer, almost burning, and he raised it higher, its glow a soft echo of the moon above. The wraith drifted closer, its form coalescing, its eyes searching Robin's with an intensity that stirred something deep within him, a recognition, perhaps, of shared purpose. The air was heavy now, thick with the scent of salt and the faint green tang of the oak's leaves, as if the forest exhaled its approval. Ilara's chants grew softer, almost a whisper, guiding the wraith toward the circle's heart. Little John's breath was visible, his massive frame tense but unmoving, while Will's breath was shallow, his usual bravado tempered by the night's weight. Much's eyes were wide, but he held his ground, the salt circle a fragile promise beneath his feet. The wraith's light flared, a sudden pulse that sent a chill through the clearing, and the air crackled with a sound like distant thunder. Robin's heart quickened, but his voice held firm, the chants flowing like water over stone. He saw the wraith's sorrow in its eyes, a grief born of centuries spent guarding a forest that men had forgotten, its roots weakened by axes and neglect. The oak branch pulsed, its warmth spreading through his arms, and he felt the forest's pulse beneath his feet, a rhythm that matched his own. Ilara's hands moved, scattering the last grains of salt to reinforce the circle, her movements precise despite the strain in her eyes. The wraith's form steadied, its light softening, and for a moment it seemed to speak, not in words, but in images, fleeting and vivid that flickered through Robin's mind. He saw ancient druids, their hands raised to the stars, their chants binding spirits to the oaks. He saw the forest thriving, its springs clear and strong, its creatures unafraid, and he saw its decline, trees felled, rituals forgotten, the wraith's desperation growing as it stole life to preserve its charge. The vision faded, leaving Robin breathless, his grip on the oak branch tightening, its bark biting into his palms. He understood now. The wraith was no villain, but a guardian trapped by a promise it could not break. Its sorrow was the forest's own, a cry for balance in a world that had tipped toward greed. Ilara's eyes met his, her chants pausing, and she nodded, as if sensing his realization. The ritual was not about banishing the wraith, but freeing it, offering it rest through respect for the old ways. The air softened, the scent of frost giving way to the warm, earthy tang of the oak, and the clearing seemed to breathe, its tension easing like a sigh. But the wraith's form flickered again, its eyes flaring with a sudden intensity as if testing their resolve. Robin stepped forward, his voice rising in the final chant, the words heavy with the weight of centuries. The oak branch glowed, its light a beacon in the night, and the wraith's form steadied, its sorrow palpable but no longer wild. Little John's voice joined the chant, his deep rumble a counterpoint to Ilara's melody, and even Will and Much murmured the words, their fear giving way to trust. The wraith hovered at the circle's centre, its light dimming, as if exhausted by its own grief. The forest seemed to lean closer, its branches swaying in a wind that no one felt, its roots humming with a power that stirred the earth. Robin's arms ached, the oak branch heavy, but he held it high, his heart steady with the knowledge that this was no battle, but a reckoning. Here, gentle dreamer, we linger in the moonlight's soft embrace, where the oak's glow weaves dreams from shadow, and the forest's breath cradles your thoughts. Let the hum of ancient chants and the warmth of the earth guide you toward rest. The tale of Robin and the Wraith flows softly onward, its truths waiting in the quiet depths of Sherwood's heart. For now, sink into the night's gentle cradle, and let sleep find you softly. The moonlight wove a silver tapestry across Sherwood, its glow softening the edges of the great oak's branches, which stretched like ancient arms toward the heavens. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and the faint, sweet musk of decaying leaves, a reminder of the forest's endless cycle of life and loss. The salt circle glimmered faintly, its grains a fragile thread binding the wraith to the world of men. Robin stood at the circle's heart, the oak branch warm in his hands, its leaves catching the moonlight like emeralds kissed by starlight. His cloak, heavy with the night's frost, clung to his shoulders, and his eyes held the wraith's glowing gaze, seeing in it a sorrow that mirrored the struggles of the land he fought for. Elara knelt nearby, her hands empty now, the salt pouch spent, her breath slow and measured as she chanted the ancient words. Her voice was a soft current, flowing through the night, its cadence blending with the rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of a stream hidden in the forest depths. Little John stood firm, his quarterstaff planted in the earth, his massive frame a steady presence against the forest mysteries. Will Scarlet's red cloak glowed faintly, a spark of defiance in the silvered dark, his eyes sharp but softened by the ritual's weight. Much, his fear softened by the group's unity, held his bow loosely, his gaze steady on the wraith's shimmering form. The wraith hovered, its pale light a gentle pulse, its twin moon eyes glowing with a sorrow that seemed to seep into the earth itself. The air carried the rich scent of damp earth and the faint, sweet tang of blooming elder, as if the clearing exhaled in quiet anticipation. Robin's chants merged with Ilara's, their voices a harmony that felt like a bridge between the world of men and the ancient spirits that guarded Sherwood. The oak branch glowed softly, its warmth spreading through his arms as if it carried the memory of the forest's prime, when its springs ran clear and its oak stood unbowed. The ritual was a delicate balance, a dance of sound and will that held the wraith's power in check. Elara had spoken of the forest's need, its springs weakened by years of neglect, its balance disrupted by men who forgot the old ways. Robin felt the truth of it in the branch's pulse, in the way the air hummed with the forest's quiet plea. His mind, honed by years of outwitting foes, turned now to a deeper purpose, not to defeat the wraith, but to offer it rest, to restore the balance it guarded. The wraith's form steadied, its light softening, as if it sensed his intent, its eyes searching his with a depth that stirred his heart. The clearing was alive with the forest's energy, the ground beneath their feet thrumming with a pulse that matched the oak's glow. The air grew warmer, the scent of frost fading, replaced by the rich, resinous tang of pine and the faint sweetness of blooming elder, as if the forest exhaled in approval. Robin raised the oak branch higher, its light a beacon in the night, and felt a shift, a softening of the weight that had pressed against his chest since the wraith first appeared. The forest seemed to lean closer, its branches swaying gently, their shadows weaving patterns across the salt circle. Elara's voice grew softer, her chants a whisper now, guiding the wraith toward the circle's heart. Her hands moved, tracing invisible threads in the air, as if weaving the forest's energy into the ritual's fabric. Robin followed her lead, his voice steady, the chants a rhythm that matched the pulse beneath his feet. The wraith's eyes flickered, their glow no longer wild but gentle, as if it saw in them a chance for peace. Little John's deep voice joined the chant, his rumble a steady anchor, while Will and Much added their own, their voices hesitant but growing stronger, their trust in Robin a light against the night's uncertainty. The wraith's form wavered, its light pulsing in time with the chants, and a vision stirred in Robin's mind. not images, but a feeling, like a song carried on the wind. He felt the wraith's exhaustion, its centuries of guarding a forest that men had forgotten, its sorrow for the lives it had taken to preserve its charge. The oak branch pulsed, its warmth a quiet promise, and Robin spoke again, not with chants but with words from his own heart, soft and earnest. He spoke of the forest, of the villagers who still honoured its ways, of the balance they sought to restore. He spoke of the poor, the hungry, the forgotten, and his own fight to protect them, a vow not unlike the wraith's own. The words felt strange, unguarded, but they flowed like a stream, clear and true. The air warmed, the scent of frost giving way to the warm earthy tang of the oak, and the clearing seemed to breathe, its tension easing like a sigh. The wraith's form steadied, its light softening, and it drifted closer, its movements slow, almost reverent. Robin felt a shift, a loosening of the weight that had pressed against his chest, as if the wraith's sorrow had found a moment of peace. But the ritual was not complete. Ilara's eyes met his, her expression a mix of hope and caution, her strength waning but her resolve unbroken. The forest's heart was stirring, but its balance was fragile, and the wraith's rest would demand more than words. What would it mean to stand in that glade? The oak branch warm in your hands, the wraith's sorrow a weight on your heart, to feel the forest's pulse beneath your feet, knowing its fate rested on your will. Little John stepped closer, his voice joining the chants again, his deep rumble a steady anchor. Will and Much followed, their voices hesitant but growing stronger, their trust in Robin a light against the night's uncertainty. The wraith's form grew fainter, its light blending with the moonlight, as if it were becoming part of the forest once more. Robin felt a quiet hope, a sense that the balance could be restored, not through force but through understanding. Ilara's hands trembled, her strength nearly spent, but her eyes were bright, her resolve unbroken. The merry men stood firm, their presence a circle of loyalty as strong as the salt beneath their feet. Here, soft wanderer, we rest in the moonlight's gentle glow, where the oak's whispers weave dreams from starlight, and the forest's breath cradles your thoughts. Let the hum of ancient chants and the warmth of the earth guide you toward rest. The tale of Robin and the wraith flows softly onward, its truths waiting in the quiet depths of Sherwood's embrace. For now, sink into the night's tender cradle, and let sleep weave its gentle spell. The starlight shimmered over Sherwood, its faint glow threading through the ancient oaks to bathe the clearing in a soft ethereal light. The air was heavy with the scent of frost-dusted ferns and the warm, earthy tang of roots stirring beneath the soil, as if the forest exhaled a quiet hope. The great oak stood as timeless guardian, its branches weaving shadows that danced across the salt circle, its grains glinting like fallen stars on the ground. Robin stood at the circle's core, the oak branch steady in his grip, its bark pulsing with a warmth that echoed the forest's ancient longing. His cloak, heavy with the night's chill, clung to his shoulders, and his eyes met the wraith's luminous gaze, finding in it a sorrow that mirrored his own fight for the land's forgotten souls. Ilara stood nearby, her silhouette softened by the starlight, her hands adjusting the salt circle with care, ensuring its fragile ward held strong. Her breath misted in the cool air, her chants a gentle hum that wove through the night, their ancient syllables blending with the rustle of branches and the faint trickle of a hidden spring. Little John anchored the circle's northern edge, his quarterstaff planted firmly, his broad frame a steady presence against the night's mysteries. Will Scarlet's red cloak caught the starlight, a quiet spark in the dark, his eyes sharp but tempered by the moment's weight. Much, his fear now a distant memory, held his bow with a steady hand, his gaze fixed on the wraith's shimmering form. The wraith hovered at the circle's heart, its pale light pulsing softly, its twin moon eyes glowing with a grief that seemed to weave into the forest's breath. The air carried the rich scent of damp earth and the faint sweet tang of blooming yarrow, as if the clearing exhaled in quiet anticipation. Robin's voice joined Alara's, their chants a harmony that felt like a thread binding the world of men to the spirits that guarded Sherwood. The oak branch glowed faintly, its warmth spreading through his arms as if it held the memory of a time when the forest springs ran clear and its oak stood unbowed. The ceremony was a delicate weave, a dance of sound and will that held the wraith's power in check. Alara had spoken of the springs, weakened by years of neglect, their flow choked by silt and forgotten rites. Robin felt the truth of it in the branch's pulse, in the way the air hummed with the forest's silent plea. His mind, sharpened by years of outsmarting foes, turned now to a deeper purpose, not to overcome, but to restore, to offer the wraith the peace it sought. The wraith's form steadied, its light softening as if it sensed his intent, its eyes searching his with a depth that stirred his soul. Can you imagine standing in that starlit glade, the air heavy with the scent of earth and pine, the ground beneath you thrumming with the forest's ancient pulse, to feel the weight of a vow older than stone, to know the land itself was listening, its heart bound to your own, to feel the weight of a vow older than stone, to know the land itself was listening, its heart bound to your own. The clearing thrummed with the forest's energy, the ground beneath their feet pulsing with a rhythm that matched the oak's glow. The air grew warmer, the scent of frost fading, replaced by the rich, resinous warmth of pine and the faint sweetness of blooming gorse, as if the forest exhaled in quiet approval. Robin raised the oak branch higher, its light a gentle beacon, and felt a shift, a softening of the weight that had pressed against his chest since the wraith's first appearance. The forest seemed to lean closer, its branches swaying softly, their shadows weaving across the salt circle like a tapestry of starlight. Alara's chants grew softer, her voice a whisper, guiding the wraith toward the circle's core. Her hands moved, tracing invisible patterns in the air, as if weaving the forest energy into the ceremony's purpose. Robin followed her lead, his voice steady, the chants a rhythm that echoed the pulse beneath his feet. The wraith's eyes flickered, their glow gentle, as if it saw in them a chance for rest. Little John's deep voice joined the chant, his rumble a steady foundation, while Will and Much added their own, their voices growing stronger, their trust in Robin a light against the night's mystery. The wraith's form wavered, its light pulsing in time with the chants, and a quiet feeling stirred in Robin's mind, a sense of the forest's past, its springs flowing freely, its oak standing tall under starlit skies. He felt the wraith's burden, its centuries of guarding a land that men had neglected, its sorrow for the lives it had taken to preserve its charge. The oak branch pulsed, its warmth a quiet promise, and Robin spoke again, his words not chants but a vow, soft and earnest. He promised to honour the forest, to protect its heart as he protected its people, to carry the old ways forward in a world that had forgotten them. The air shimmered, the scent of earth and pine growing stronger, and the clearing felt alive, its pulse thrumming through the salt circle. Robin's arms ached, the branch heavy, but he held it steady, his heart bound to the wraith's sorrow. Alara's eyes met his, her face etched with a quiet hope, her strength waning but her resolve unbroken. Little John stepped closer, his quarterstaff a silent promise, while Will and Much held their places, their fear replaced by a shared purpose. The wraith's eyes glowed faintly, their sorrow easing, as if it heard Robin's words, not as a challenge but as a gift. The ceremony reached a turning point, but its completion remained just out of reach. The wraith's light flickered, a reminder of its power, and the air crackled with a faint electric tang, as if the forest held its breath. Alara's hands trembled, her voice hoarse, but she pressed on, guiding Robin through the chants. The oak branch glowed brighter, its light a bridge between worlds, and the wraith's form steadied, its sorrow a tide that no longer threatened to overwhelm. The forest exhaled, its branches rustling, and the air grew warm, the scent of gorse and moss blending with the faint tang of the salt circle. The stars shone brighter, their light a soft echo of the oak's glow, and the clearing hummed with a quiet promise of balance restored. Robin felt a spark of hope, a sense that the Wraith's rest was within reach, not through force, but through understanding. The merry men stood firm, their voices a chorus that wove through the night, their loyalty a circle as strong as the salt beneath their feet. The forest's pulse grew stronger, its roots alive with the memory of ancient springs, and the night stretched toward a truth yet to be fully unveiled. Here, gentle dreamer, we linger in the starlight's soft embrace, where the oak's whispers weave dreams from shadow, and the forest's breath cradles your thoughts. Let the hum of ancient chants and the warmth of the earth guide you toward rest. The tale of Robin and the Wraith flows softly onward, its truths waiting in the quiet depths of Sherwood's heart. For now, sink into the night's gentle cradle, and let sleep weave its gentle spell. The moon drifted lower in the Sherwood sky, its silver light softening as it wove through the ancient oaks, casting a gentle glow across the clearing. The air carried the sharp scent of frost-touched earth, and the warm, earthy tang of roots stirring beneath the soil, as if the forest exhaled a quiet hope. The great oak stood as a timeless sentinel, its gnarled branches swaying gently, casting shadows that danced across the salt circle, its grains glinting like fallen stars on the ground. Robin stood at the circle's core, the oak branch steady in his grip, its bark pulsing with a warmth that echoed the forest's ancient longing. His cloak, heavy with the night's chill, clung to his shoulders, and his eyes met the Wraith's luminous gaze, finding in it a sorrow that mirrored his own fight for the land's forgotten souls. Alara knelt nearby, her silhouette softened by the moonlight, her hands adjusting the salt circle with care, ensuring its fragile ward held strong. Her breath misted in the cool air, her chants a gentle hum that wove through the night, their ancient syllables blending with the rustle of branches and the faint trickle of a hidden spring. Little John anchored the circle's northern edge, his quarterstaff planted firmly, his broad frame a steady presence against the night's mysteries. Will Scarlet's red cloak caught the moonlight, a quiet spark in the dark, his eyes sharp but tempered by the moment's weight. Much, his fear now a distant memory, held his bow with a steady hand, his gaze fixed on the Wraith's shimmering form. The Wraith hovered at the circle's heart, its pale light pulsing softly, its twin moon eyes glowing with a grief that seemed to weave into the forest's breath. The air carried the rich scent of damp earth and the faint sweet tang of blooming yarrow, as if the clearing exhaled in quiet anticipation. Robin's voice joined Alara's, their chants a harmony that felt like a thread binding the world of men to the spirits that guarded Sherwood. The oak branch glowed faintly, its warmth spreading through his arms, as if it held the memory of a time when the forest springs ran clear and its oaks stood unbowed. The ceremony was a delicate weave, a dance of sound and will that held the Wraith's power in check. Alara had spoken of the springs, weakened by years of neglect, their flow choked by silt and forgotten rites. Robin felt the truth of it in the branch's pulse, in the way the air hummed with the forest's silent plea. His mind, sharpened by years of outsmarting foes, turned now to a deeper purpose, not to overcome, but to restore, to offer the Wraith the peace it sought. The Wraith's form steadied, its light softening, as if it sensed his intent, its eyes searching his with a depth that stirred his soul. The clearing thrummed with the forest's energy, the ground beneath their feet pulsing with a rhythm that matched the oak's glow. The air grew warmer, the scent of frost fading, replaced by the rich, resinous warmth of pine and the faint sweetness of blooming gorse, as if the forest exhaled in quiet approval. Robin raised the oak branch higher, its light a gentle beacon, and felt a shift, a softening of the weight that had pressed against his chest since the Wraith's first appearance. The forest seemed to lean closer, its branches swaying softly, their shadows weaving across the salt circle like a tapestry of starlight. Ilara's chants grew softer, her voice a whisper, guiding the wraith toward the circle's core. Her hands moved, tracing invisible patterns in the air, as if weaving the forest's energy into the ceremony's purpose. Robin followed her lead, his voice steady, the chants a rhythm that echoed the pulse beneath his feet. The wraith's eyes flickered, their glow gentle, as if it saw in them a chance for rest. Little John's deep voice joined the chant, his rumble a steady foundation, while Will and Much added their own, their voices growing stronger, their trust in Robin alight against the night's mystery. The wraith's form wavered, its light pulsing in time with the chants, and a quiet feeling stirred in Robin's mind, a sense of the forest past, its springs flowing freely, its oaks standing tall under starlit skies. He felt the wraith's burden, its centuries of guarding a land that men had neglected, its sorrow for the lives it had taken to preserve its charge. The oak branch pulsed, its warmth a quiet promise, and Robin spoke again, his words not chants but a vow, soft and earnest. He promised to honour the forest, to protect its heart as he protected its people, to carry the old ways forward in a world that had forgotten them. The air shimmered, the scent of earth and pine growing stronger, and the clearing felt alive, its pulse thrumming through the salt circle. Robin's arms ached, the branch heavy, but he held it steady, his heart bound to the wraith's sorrow. Ilara's eyes met his, her face etched with a quiet hope, her strength waning but her resolve unbroken. Little John stepped closer, his quarterstaff a silent promise, while Will and Much held their places, their fear replaced by a shared purpose. The wraith's eyes glowed faintly, their sorrow easing, as if it heard Robin's words not as a challenge but as a gift. The ceremony reached a turning point, but its completion remained just out of reach. The wraith's light flickered, a reminder of its power, and the air crackled with a faint electric tang, as if the forest held its breath. Ilara's hands trembled, her voice hoarse, but she pressed on, guiding Robin through the chants. The oak branch glowed brighter, its light a bridge between worlds, and the wraith's form steadied, its sorrow a tide that no longer threatened to overwhelm. The forest exhaled, its branches rustling, and the air grew warm, the scent of gorse and moss blending with the faint tang of the salt circle. What would it feel like to stand there, the oak branch warm in your hands, the wraith's sorrow a weight on your heart, to know the forest's fate rested on your voice, your will, your respect for a world older than your own? The stars shone brighter, their light a soft echo of the oak's glow, and the clearing hummed with a quiet promise of balance restored. Robin felt a spark of hope, a sense that the wraith's rest was within reach, not through force, but through understanding. The merry men stood firm, their voices a chorus that wove through the night, their loyalty a circle as strong as the salt beneath their feet. The forest's pulse grew stronger, its roots alive with the memory of ancient springs, and the night stretched toward a truth yet to be fully unveiled. Ilara's voice faltered, her strength nearly spent, and Robin stepped closer, his chants growing stronger to carry her through. The wraith's form wavered, its light softening, and it drifted toward the great oak as if drawn to its heart. Robin felt a surge of warmth from the branch, its glow brighter now, and a vision flickered through his mind. Not a memory, but a feeling, like a song carried on the wind. He saw the forest springs flowing clear, its oak standing tall, its creatures thriving under a sky unmarred by smoke. The wraith's sorrow was a cry for that world, a plea to restore what had been lost. Robin's words flowed, not just chants, but a promise, spoken with the quiet conviction of a man who knew the weight of duty. "We see you," he said, his voice low, blending with the night's hush. "We see your task, your sorrow. Let us carry it now. Let the forest live through us." The wraith's eyes softened, their glow no longer piercing but warm, as if it heard him, not as an outlaw but as a guardian of the same land it protected. The air grew lighter, the scent of frost giving way to the warm, earthy tang of the oak, and the clearing seemed to breathe, its tension easing like a sigh. The wraith's form grew fainter, its light blending with the starlight, as if it were becoming part of the forest once more. Alara's chant slowed, her voice a gentle lullaby, and she nodded to Robin, her eyes bright with a quiet triumph. Little John's rumble steadied, his quarterstaff a silent vow, while Will and Much stood firm, their voices a soft echo of the forest's song. The wraith's form shimmered like mist caught in dawn's first light, its edges softening as it hovered at the heart of the salt circle, its twin moon eyes glowing with a sorrow that seemed to pulse with the forest's own breath. The air was alive with the scent of damp moss and the warm resinous tang of ancient oaks, their branches swaying gently, as if Sherwood itself leaned closer to listen. Robin stood firm, the oak branch heavy in his hands, its bark biting into his palms, its faint glow a beacon in the moonlit clearing. His cloak, damp with the night's frost, clung to his shoulders, and his breath misted in the chill, each exhale blending with the soft hum of Alara's chants, their ancient syllables weaving through the night like a lullaby for the land. Alara knelt at the circle's edge, her fingers tracing the salt's delicate line, ensuring its ward held strong, her braid catching the moonlight like a thread of shadow. Her voice was hoarse now, strained by hours of chanting, yet it carried a quiet strength, each word a stone placed carefully in a river's flow. Little John stood opposite, his quarterstaff planted in the earth, its wood worn smooth by years of use, his massive frame a steady anchor against the night's uncertainties. Will Scarlet's red cloak flickered like a dying ember, his eyes sharp but softened by the ritual's weight, his fingers resting lightly on his dagger's hilt, its steel cool to the touch. Much, his fear transformed into resolve, gripped his bow with steady hands, his gaze fixed on the wraith, as if seeking its truth in the glow of its eyes. The forest was silent save for the chants and the faint rustle of leaves, their sound like a distant flute, soft and haunting. The air carried the sharp tang of frost-kissed ferns and the faint sweetness of blooming gorse, as if the clearing exhaled a quiet hope. Robin felt the oak branch pulse, its warmth spreading through his arms, a reminder of the forest's ancient heart. He saw the wraith not as a foe but as a guardian, its sorrow a mirror of his own fight for the forgotten. Villagers taxed into hunger, their hands calloused from ploughing fields that yielded too little, their evenings spent chewing coarse rye bread, its taste earthy and slightly sour. This was 1190, a time when survival was a daily defiance, when the scent of wood smoke and sweat-soaked wool clung to every hamlet, and the forest offered both refuge and mystery. Can you feel the night's chill on your face, the ground beneath you thrumming with the forest's pulse? To stand in a clearing where the air smells of earth and starlight, where every breath draws you closer to a world older than memory. The wraith's light flickered, a sudden pulse that sent a shiver through the clearing, and the air crackled with a faint electric tang, like a storm brewing in the stillness. Alara's eyes darted to Robin, her expression a mix of hope and caution, her hands trembling as she scattered the last grains of salt to reinforce the circle. The wraith's form wavered, its eyes flaring with a sudden intensity, as if testing their resolve, its sorrow a tide that threatened to break free. Robin's heart quickened, but his voice held firm, the chants flowing like water over stone, their rhythm a bridge between the world of men and the spirits that guarded Sherwood. He felt a pull, a stirring in his chest, as if the wraith's gaze saw not just the outlaw but the man, Robin, who stole not for greed but for justice, who knew the weight of duty as keenly as the guardian before him. The oak branch grew warmer, almost burning, and a vision flickered through his mind, a forest untouched by axes, its springs clear and strong, its oak standing tall under a sky unmarred by smoke. He saw the Wraith's creation, forged by druids who sang to the stars, their hands weaving magic into the roots of the great oak. And he saw its loneliness, centuries of guarding a land that men had forgotten, its sorrow growing with each life it took to preserve its charge. Robin's voice softened, blending with Ilara's chants, but he added words of his own, spoken not from memory but from the heart. "We see your burden," he said, his tone low, like a friend addressing a weary traveller. "You've guarded this forest through years of silence, through winters that starved the land and summers that burned it dry. Let us share your task. Let us carry the old ways forward so you may rest." The Wraith's eyes softened, their glow no longer piercing but warm, as if it heard him, not as a threat but as a kindred soul. The air shimmered, the scent of frost giving way to the rich, earthy tang of the oak, and the clearing seemed to breathe, its tension ease in like a sigh. Ilara's chant slowed, her voice a gentle lullaby, and she nodded to Robin, her eyes bright with a quiet triumph. Little John's rumble joined the chant, his deep voice a steady foundation, while Will and Much added their own, their voices stronger now, their trust in Robin alight against the night's mystery. But the ritual was not yet complete. The Wraith's form flickered, its light pulsing in time with the chants, as if caught between rest and resistance. Ilara's hands faltered, her strength nearly spent, and she whispered to Robin, her voice barely audible over the chants. "It needs more than words," she said, her breath misting in the cool air, her fingers brushing the salt circle, its grains gritty against her skin. "It needs a vow, a promise to the forest, to its springs and roots. Speak it, Robin, not as an outlaw, but as its guardian." Robin nodded, his mind racing, his cunning turning inward. He thought of the villagers, their hands blistered from scythes, their evenings spent by rushlights that smelled of wax and hope, their lives tied to the land as surely as the Wraith's. He thought of Sherwood, its paths worn by pilgrims and outlaws, its air thick with the scent of pine and the faint tang of hidden springs. He raised the oak branch higher, its glow a beacon in the night, and spoke again, his voice steady but soft like a prayer whispered in the dark. "I vow to protect this forest," he said, his words weaving into the chants, their rhythm matching the pulse beneath his feet. "To honour its springs, its oaks, its secrets, to teach its ways to those who've forgotten, so its heart may beat strong again. Rest now, guardian, and let us carry your light." The Wraith's form steadied, its light softening, and the air grew warmer, the scent of frost fading into the rich, resinous warmth of pine and earth. The forest exhaled, its branches swaying gently, their shadows weaving across the salt circle like a tapestry of starlight. Ilara's eyes met Robin's, her face etched with a quiet hope, her strength waning but her resolve unbroken. Little John stepped closer, his quarterstaff a silent promise, while Will and Much held their places, their fear replaced by a shared purpose. The Wraith's eyes glowed faintly, their sorrow easing, as if it felt the truth in Robin's words, a vow as binding as the druid's ancient rites. What would it mean to stand there, the oak branch warm in your hands, the forest's breath a quiet song in your ears, to feel the weight of a vow that binds you to the land, its roots twined with your own? The clearing thrummed with the forest's energy, the ground beneath their feet pulsing with a rhythm that matched the oak's glow. The Wraith drifted closer to the great oak, its form blending with the moonlight, as if drawn to its heart. Robin felt a surge of warmth from the branch, its light brighter now, and a quiet certainty settled over him, a sense that the balance was shifting, the forest's heart stirring back to life. Ilara's chants grew softer, almost a whisper, guiding the Wraith toward rest, her hands tracing the air as if weaving the forest's energy into the ceremony's purpose. The wraith's light pulsed once more, a gentle ripple that sent a breeze through the clearing, stirring the leaves with a sound like distant flutes. Its eyes met Robin's one last time, their glow no longer sorrowful but serene, as if it saw in him a guardian worthy of its trust. The oak branch trembled, its leaves quivering, and the air shimmered with the scent of blooming elder and the faint tang of damp stone, as if the forest spring stirred beneath the earth. The wraith's form grew fainter, its light blending with the starlight, and it drifted upward toward the great oak's branches, as if returning to the heart it had guarded for centuries. The forest exhaled, a sound like a sigh, and the clearing grew still, the air warm with the scent of pine and earth. The salt circle glimmered faintly, its purpose fulfilled, and the oak branch in Robin's hands felt lighter, its glow fading to a soft warmth, like a hearth after a long night. Elara sank to her knees, her strength spent, her eyes bright with a quiet triumph. Little John lowered his quarterstaff, his massive frame relaxing, his breath visible in the cool air. Will Scarlet's red cloak caught the moonlight, a quiet spark in the dark, while Much let out a shaky breath, his bow resting at his side, its wood cool against his fingers. The ritual was complete, the wraith at rest, its sorrow lifted like mist burned away by dawn. The forest felt alive again, its pulse strong beneath their feet, its air rich with the scents of moss and blooming flowers, as if Sherwood itself thanked them. Robin lowered the oak branch, his heart steady but heavy with the weight of what he'd learned, of a world older than his own, of a duty that stretched beyond his bow and arrows. He looked to Elara, her face pale but serene, and nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her wisdom, her courage, her place in the forest story. Here, gentle wanderer, we linger in the moonlight's soft embrace, where the oak's whispers weave dreams from starlight, and the forest's breath cradles your thoughts. Let the hum of the earth and the scent of pine guide you toward rest. The tale of Robin and the wraith draws closer to its end, its truths woven into the quiet depths of Sherwood's heart. For now, sink into the night's gentle cradle, and let sleep weave its tender spell. The first light of dawn crept over Sherwood, its golden glow threading through the oaks to touch the clearing with warmth. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of dew-soaked moss and the faint sweetness of wild honeysuckle, a reminder of the forest's renewal. The great oak stood silent now, its branches swaying gently, its roots humming with a pulse that felt stronger, clearer, as if the springs beneath the earth flowed freely once more. Robin stood at the clearing's edge, the oak branch still in his hand, its bark cool now, its leaves catching the dawn's light like fragments of a new day. His cloak, heavy with dew, brushed against the grass, and the air tasted of fresh earth, a quiet promise of balance restored. Elara stood beside him, her basket at her side, her hands stained with the green of crushed herbs, their sharp scent lingering in the air. Her face was tired but bright, her eyes reflecting the dawn's glow, her braid loose from the night's work. Little John leaned on his quarterstaff, his massive frame casting a long shadow, his beard damp with the morning's mist. Will Scarlet's red cloak glowed in the sunlight, his usual restlessness softened by the night's victory, his fingers brushing the dagger's hilt out of habit rather than need. Much, his fear now a memory, smiled faintly, his bow slung across his back, the ground beneath his boots soft with fallen leaves. The hamlet of Edwinstowe stirred in the distance, its thatched roofs catching the dawn's gold, the air alive with the scent of baking bread and the faint musk of livestock. The villagers would wake to a forest at peace, their whispers of the wraith replaced by tales of Robin Hood, not just the outlaw, but the guardian who faced the night's mysteries and won. They would speak of Elara, the young herbalist whose knowledge wove the ritual's success, and of Agnes, whose wisdom held the key to the old ways. The scent of wood smoke drifted from the village, mingling with the morning's freshness, a reminder of life's fragile rhythm. Women kneading dough, men sharpening scythes, children darting through the lanes, their laughter a song against the hardships of 1190. Can you picture it? The way the dawn's light would paint the forest gold, the air alive with the scent of earth and hope. To walk a world where every day was a defiance, yet every sunrise a promise of something new. Robin turned to Alara, his voice low, blending with the morning's quiet. "You've given us more than chance," he said, his tone warm, like a friend thanking a guide. "You've given Sherwood its heart again." Alara smiled, her hands brushing the basket's woven edge, its texture rough against her fingers. "It was not me alone," she said, her voice soft like water over stones. "You spoke to the Wraith as one who knows duty. The forest heard you, Robin Hood." He nodded, his eyes tracing the great oak, its branches swaying in the breeze, their rustle a soft echo of the night's chants. He thought of the villagers, their hands blistered from work, their evenings spent by rush lights that smelled of wax and hope, their lives tied to the land as surely as his own. He thought of the Wraith, its sorrow now at rest, its light woven into the forest's roots, its duty passed to those who would remember. The oak branch felt lighter now, as if its task was done, and he set it gently against the tree, its leaves brushing the bark with a sound like a whisper. The merry men gathered close, their faces etched with a quiet pride, their breaths visible in the morning's chill. Little John clapped Robin on the shoulder, his hand heavy but warm, his grin a rare break in his stoic mask. "Not a bad night's work, Robin," he rumbled, his voice blending with the rustle of leaves, "though I'd rather face a sheriff's men than a ghost any day." Will Scarlet laughed, a sharp, bright sound that cut through the morning's quiet, his red cloak catching the sunlight. "Aye, but we've a tale to tell now, one to make the taverns hum," he said, his fingers dancing as if eager to weave the story already. Much, his bow slung across his back, shook his head, his smile soft. "I'll take a warm hearth and a mug of ale over spirits, thank you," he said, his voice light, the stale taste of yesterday's bread still lingering on his tongue. Robin looked to the forest, its paths stretching into shadow, its air rich with the scent of pine and dew. He felt a kinship with Sherwood, not just as a refuge, but as a charge, a living thing that asked for his protection as he asked for its shelter. The Wraith's rest was a beginning, not an end, a vow to carry the old ways forward, to honour the land as he honoured its people. He turned to his men, his voice steady, a quiet command that carried the weight of their shared night. "We return to the hamlet," he said, his cloak whispering against the grass. "We thank Agnes, share what we've learned. The forest is at peace, but its heart needs tending. We'll see it done." The group moved through the forest, their steps light on the mossy paths, the air alive with the scent of wildflowers and the faint tang of hidden springs. The dawn painted the trees in shades of gold and green, and the forest seemed to hum, its pulse strong and clear, as if thanking them for their care. The hamlet loomed ahead, its smoke rising in lazy spirals, its sounds, children's laughter, the clink of a blacksmith's hammer, a reminder of the life they fought for. Here, gentle wanderer, we pause in the soft cradle of dawn, where the forest's murmurs blend with the glow of morning, and the world breathes anew. Let the scent of dew and the rustle of leaves linger in your dreams, carrying you toward a rest. The tale of Robin and the Wraith finds its quiet end, its truths woven into the heart of Sherwood's song. For now, rest easy, and let the forest hold you close. The morning sun climbed higher, its light spilling across the fields of Edwinstowe, turning the dew-soaked grass to a carpet of diamonds. The air was rich with the scent of fresh-turned earth and the faint sweetness of apples stored in cool cellars, a reminder of the hamlet's quiet resilience. Robin led his men toward Agnes's cottage, the oak branch now resting against the great oak, its task complete, its warmth a memory in his hands. his cloak still damp from the night's frost, brushed against the tall grasses, their blades cool and sharp against his legs. Elara walked beside him, her basket brimming with the herbs she'd gathered before the ritual, their green scent mingling with the morning's freshness, her steps light despite her exhaustion. The hamlet was alive now, its rhythm steady but fragile. Women hauling water from the well, its cold bite seeping into their hands, men mending nets with calloused fingers, their movements slow but deliberate. The scent of baking bread drifted from cottages, its crusty warmth a promise against the hardships of 1190, when a poor harvest could empty a village's stores and a lord's tax could break its spirit. Children darted between houses, their laughter sharp and fleeting, their bare feet slapping the damp earth, leaving prints that faded in the sun. The air carried the musk of livestock and the faint tang of smoke, a reminder of the daily toil that bound the villagers to the land. Agnes stood outside her cottage, her gnarled hands folded over a wooden spoon, its surface stained with years of herb work, the sharp scent of rosemary clinging to her fingers. Her eyes, bright despite her age, met Robin's with a knowing warmth, as if she sensed the night's success before he spoke. The fire outside her door crackled, sending sparks upward like tiny stars, and the air was thick with the scent of sage and the faint waxy tang of a rushlight burning low within. The villagers lingered nearby, their tasks paused, their eyes curious but cautious, the ground beneath their feet soft with the morning's dew. Robin stopped before Agnes, his voice low, blending with the hum of the hamlet's life. "The wraith is at rest," he said, his tone warm but weighted with respect. "The forest breathes easier now, thanks to your wisdom and Elara's skill. We've made a vow to honour its heart, to keep its ways alive." Agnes nodded, her lips curving into a faint smile, her hands tightening on the spoon, its wood warm from her grip. "You've done more than banish a spirit, Robin Hood," she said, her voice like the rustle of leaves, soft but unyielding. "You've reminded us that the forest is not just a place, but a promise. See that you keep yours." Elara stepped forward, her basket at her side, her hands stained with the green of yarrow and chamomile, their scents sharp in the morning air. "The springs will flow stronger now," she said, her voice soft but clear, like a stream finding its path. "But they need tending, herbs to bless the waters, chants to honour the oaks. The village will help as we always have." Robin nodded, his eyes tracing the horizon where the forest met the fields, its shadows softened by the dawn's light. He thought of the villagers' lives, their hands blistered from work, their evenings spent by fires that smelled of pine and hope, their stories woven into the land as surely as the wraiths had been. He thought of Sherwood, its paths a refuge for outlaws and pilgrims, its air alive with the scent of dew and hidden springs. The wraith's rest was a gift, not just to the forest but to its people, a reminder of the balance they shared. What would it feel like to stand in that hamlet, the air thick with the scent of bread and earth, the forest's pulse a quiet song beneath your feet? To know you'd faced the night's mysteries and found not just victory, but understanding. The merry men gathered around, their faces etched with a quiet pride, their breaths visible in the morning's chill. Little John leaned on his quarterstaff, his grin broad, his beard catching the sunlight. "A fine tale for the taverns," he said, his voice a deep rumble, blending with the hum of bees in the nearby clover. Will Scarlet laughed, his red cloak a spark against the green, his fingers dancing as if eager to weave the story into song. Much, his bow slung across his back, shook his head, his smile soft, the taste of fresh bread lingering from a villager's gift, its warmth a comfort against the morning's cool. Robin looked to his men, then to the village, his heart steady with a new purpose. "We'll carry the forest's story," he said, his voice a quiet vow, blending with the morning song, "and we'll see its heart kept strong, for the folk here and the ones yet to come." The villagers began to gather, their wariness softening into gratitude, their hands offering bowls of warm pottage, its earthy taste a gift of their meagre stores. The air was alive with the scent of herbs and the faint tang of smoke, the hamlet's rhythm a quiet defiance against the hardships of their time. Robin and his men sat among them, sharing stories of the night, their laughter mingling with the clink of wooden spoons and the soft murmur of voices. Elara spoke of the springs, of the herbs she had planted to keep them clear, her words a promise to the land. Agnes watched from her doorway, her eyes bright, her hands folded over the spoon, its wood a reminder of the wisdom she'd shared. The forest loomed at the hamlet's edge, its oaks standing tall, their branches swaying in the breeze, their rustle a soft echo of the night's chants. The air was rich with the scent of pine and dew, and the ground felt alive, its pulse strong and clear, as if Sherwood thanked them for its renewal. The sun climbed higher, painting the fields in shades of gold, and the world seemed to breathe easier, its balance restored by a vow spoken under the stars. Here, gentle dreamer, we rest in the soft embrace of morning, where the forest song blends with the glow of dawn, and the air carries the promise of new beginnings. Let the scent of bread and the rustle of leaves linger in your dreams, cradling you toward rest. The tale of Robin and the Wraith finds its quiet end, its truths woven into the heart of Sherwood's embrace. For now, sink into the warmth of this moment, and let sleep weave its gentle spell. The sun rose higher over Sherwood, its light spilling across the hamlet of Edwinstowe, turning the thatched roofs to gold and the fields to a sea of green. The air was alive with the scent of fresh-baked bread and the faint musk of livestock, a reminder of the village's fragile rhythm, women hauling water, men mending tools, children darting through the lanes with laughter that cut through the morning's quiet. Robin stood at the hamlet's edge, his cloak now dry in the sun's warmth, his boots crusted with the mud of the forest's paths. The oak branch was gone, left at the great oak's base, but its warmth lingered in his hands, a memory of the night's work, its bark's texture a quiet echo of the forest's trust. Elara walked beside him, her basket brimming with herbs, their green scent sharp in the air, her eyes bright with the dawn's promise. She spoke softly of the springs, of the chants she'd teach the village children, her voice a gentle current weaving through the morning's hum. Little John followed, his quarterstaff tapping the ground, its rhythm a steady counterpoint to the birdsong that filled the air. Will Scarlet's red cloak caught the sunlight, his laughter light as he recounted the knight's tale, his fingers brushing the dagger's hilt, its steel warmed by the sun. Much, his bow slung across his back, chewed a sprig of mint, its sharp taste a small comfort, his smile soft as he watched the village stir. Agnes stood at her cottage, her hands folded over the wooden spoon, its surface stained with years of herb work, the scent of rosemary clinging to her fingers. She watched them go, her eyes bright with a quiet pride, her voice silent but her presence a reminder of the wisdom that had guided them. The villagers gathered, their hands offering gifts, loaves of rye bread, their crusts warm and gritty, bowls of pottage thick with turnips, their earthy taste a gift of their labour. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and the faint tang of dew, the hamlet's life a fragile thread woven into the forest's heart. Robin paused, his gaze tracing the forest's edge, where the oaks stood tall, their branches swaying in the breeze, their rustle a soft echo of the night's chants. He thought of the Wraith, its sorrow now at rest, its light woven into the forest roots, its duty passed to those who would carry it forward. He thought of the villagers, their hands blistered from work, their evenings spent by rushlights that smelled of wax and hope, their lives tied to the land as surely as his own. Sherwood was more than a refuge now, it was a charge, a promise to protect its heart as he protected its people. What would it feel like to walk those paths, the air rich with the scent of pine and earth, the forest's pulse a quiet song beneath your feet? to know you'd faced the night's mysteries and found not just peace, but purpose. The merry men moved toward the forest, their steps light on the mossy paths, their laughter blending with the hum of bees and the distant low of cattle. Ilara stayed behind, her basket at her side, her hands already reaching for the herbs that would bless the springs, her voice a soft promise to the land. The villagers watched them go, their eyes no longer wary but grateful, their hands raised in quiet farewell. The air was alive with the scent of wildflowers and the faint tang of hidden springs, and the forest seemed to hum, its pulse strong and clear, as if thanking them for its renewal. Robin led his men into the trees, their shadows blending with the oaks, their footsteps muffled by years of fallen leaves, the ground cool and yielding beneath their boots. The air was rich with the scent of pine and dew, and the forest felt alive, its branches swaying in a breeze that carried the promise of spring. The Wraith's tale was done, but its legacy lingered, a reminder of the balance between man and land, of the old ways that bound them together. Robin's heart was steady, his purpose clear, his bow slung across his back, its yew wood smooth from years of use, its string taut as a vow. The forest stretched before them, its paths winding into shadow, its air alive with the whispers of leaves and the distant song of a lark. The sun climbed higher, painting the canopy in shades of gold and green, and the world seemed to breathe easier, its balance restored by a night of courage and understanding. Robin glanced back at the hamlet, its smoke rising in lazy spirals, its life a quiet defiance against the hardships of their time. He smiled, a quiet curve of his lips, and turned to the forest, ready to carry its story forward. Here, gentle dreamer, we rest in the warm embrace of morning, where the forest's song weaves dreams from sunlight, and the air carries the scent of hope. Let the rustle of leaves and the hum of the earth cradle you toward rest. The tale of Robin and the Wraith is complete, its truths woven into the heart of Sherwood's embrace, a quiet gift to carry into your dreams. For now, sink into the warmth of this moment, and let sleep weave its gentle spell. That's our tale tonight, listeners. Share your thoughts, your city, your time zone. Are you with Sophia in Athens as the sun sets, with Mohammed in Dubai under midnight silence, with Mei Ling in Hong Kong at dawn's first glow, or with Lucas in Sao Paulo as evening lights flicker? Like this episode, subscribe if you love these shadows. Keep your lanterns lit. Rest well. Until next time.